Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for inviting me to give this presentation in the last of the series. We've just heard a wonderful presentation by Dr. Endo of exactly the subject that has been emphasized in this series about the importance of the purpose of business in addressing the issues and problems that both business and the world face. And the notion of purpose that I've been emphasizing in this series is that corporate purpose is about producing solutions, just along the lines that Dr. Endo was emphasizing, solutions that we face as individuals, societies, and the natural world, and to find innovative ways of producing those solutions so that they are profitable for companies as well as of great value to society and the natural world. And so the definition of the purpose of a company that we've been using is that it should be about producing profitable solutions to the problems of people and planet, not profiting from producing problems for either. Now, what Dr. Endo was talking about is exactly along those lines. He talked about the company's role to design long-term visions for humans and society combined with continuous value creation. Long-term visions for humans and society, that is to say, solving problems of society with the continuous creation of value, that is to say, that they should be profitable. And in the case of NEC, he emphasized that the purpose is to connect digital technologies and humans implementing visions of a brighter future world. In other words, how one can use technology as an innovative way of producing those profitable solutions that benefit both people and the natural world. Now, the issue that he has been illustrating, which is core to this, is how purpose should be implemented in organizations. And the first point to make, which he was emphasizing, is that this is not something that's on the side of a business. It's not philanthropy. It's core to the business and core to its strategy. The way to think about it is it's integral to the corporate governance of a company. In Oxford, we've been developing a framework to help the boards of companies across the world in terms of implementing purpose, and we call it the SCORE framework, where the 5 letters of SCORE stand for the most significant items. The first letter, S, is to simplify and clarify the purpose, to have a very clear notion of what problems a company is seeking to solve and how it's going to solve those problems and for whom it is solving those problems. The second letter is C for connect, to connect the purpose of the company with its strategy so that it is really core to the business, and to connect the business with any other parties that the company needs to work with in terms of producing those solutions. And again, Dr. Endo talked about that notion of companies working in partnership with other organizations. The third letter, O, is for ownership, the ownership of the company's purpose. This relates to both the formal owners, the shareholders of the company, but it's also about a notion of ownership that extends throughout an organization from the board of the company right down to the shop floor, so that everyone in the organization has a sense of ownership of their part of the corporate purpose. And again, Dr. Endo described how NEC seeks to do that through the various meetings, team meetings that take place in the company. The fourth letter, R, is for reward, to ensure that the reward system in a company is aligned with delivery of the company's purpose. And to do that, the company has to measure its performance against its purpose and ensure that it has the metrics to measure its performance and thereby to align its incentive systems with the performance against its corporate purpose. The final letter, E, is to exemplify the purpose, to bring out the purpose in terms of narratives that talk about the success of the company in terms of delivering on its purpose, but also to be authentic about the purpose and to emphasize the difficulties and problems that have been encountered and where there have been failures in terms of delivering the purpose, as well as the successes and what needs to be done better in the future. So if one looks at some of the main challenges that companies face in terms of implementation of purpose, the first one is to ensure that there is a clear definition of the purpose and to engage people in the process of determining the purpose so that they do feel a real sense of ownership of the purpose and a belief in the purpose that the company is putting forward. And the board of the company needs to demonstrate the credibility of the purpose, that it is really something that is authentic to the business, not just something that the business is using as a marketing or a promotion tool, but something that there is a strong sense of value to the purpose, and the values of the organization and the culture of the organization are firmly aligned with that corporate purpose. And there's also the issue about the alignment of measurement and incentives with the organization. And companies often find it quite hard to identify the right metrics that are required to demonstrate delivery of purpose and to ensure that the incentives and reward systems go beyond just the traditional financial measures to encompass what it means to be successful in terms of delivering the purpose. And that is key in relation to not just people within the organization, but to outsiders, to the stakeholders in the firm, and in particular to the investors who look to the company to demonstrate that they really are committed to their corporate purpose and that they are delivering on their corporate purpose. So it's important to build up a reporting system on purpose and to be able to demonstrate to outside parties the extent to which the company is actually fulfilling its purpose. An issue that frequently arises in this area is whether or not there is a trade-off between purpose and profits. And one of the points that I want to emphasize is that in terms of the way in which purpose is being defined here, there should be no trade-off at all. To begin with, there's mounting evidence, empirical evidence done by very good researchers around the world of a positive relationship between purposeful companies and the profitability and value creation of companies. But furthermore, if one takes this definition of purpose that I've been describing, producing profitable solutions, not profiting from producing problems, then it follows automatically that there is a direct alignment between success in purpose and the profitability of the business. And that's because that if there is a profit, then because one does not profit from producing problems, then there must also be a benefit, because a profit only derives from producing a solution, not from producing a problem. Furthermore, if there is a benefit, then there must be a profit, because the first part of the statement is that one has to produce profitable solutions. This is not about philanthropy. It's about the existence of a business operating in a profitable fashion. So it's true by definition, according to what I define a purpose to be, that profit increases if there is a societal benefit. In other words, there's a one-to-one relationship between profit and societal benefits. Now, what this brings out is the difference between purpose and some of the other business concepts that have existed for quite some time. The most obvious and widely applied is the notion of what is sometimes termed shareholder primacy, and that is that a business exists simply to create profit. It's associated in particular with the Milton Friedman doctrine that there is one and only one social purpose of business: to increase profits so long as it stays within the rules of the game. Now, this notion of profit differs from that of the Friedman doctrine on two scores. First of all, in terms of the notion of causation, and secondly, in terms of the definition of profit. It recognizes that in contrast to the Friedman doctrine that the pursuit of profit is legitimate because it's derivative of solving problems. In other words, the purpose is not about producing profit. The profit is derivative of solving problems. And secondly, the profit is only legitimate if it's associated with solving, not producing problems. But it also differs from some other notions of business, which are sometimes associated with the idea of stakeholder theory, that the business is there to promote the interests of all of its stakeholders. Well, in trying to promote that notion of stakeholder theory, one needs multiple measures of the performance of the firm. One can't just simply look at it in terms of its profit. It's sometimes described as being a triple bottom line determination of the performance of a company. And that introduces a lot of complications in terms of how one balances those various measures of performance. Well, in relation to purpose, there's only one necessary measure at the end of the day of performance, and that is profit. But it has to be a true profit, a profit which derives from producing solutions, not from producing problems. And in that case, there's clearly no conflict between stakeholder and shareholder interests. And instead, what a business needs to do is to find innovative ways and investments that help to solve societal problems. I just want to illustrate this in relation to the trillion-dollar companies that exist in the world, of which there are now 5 of them. And this slide brings out the fact that those 5 companies account for 50% of the total value of US stock markets. They are Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Facebook. And they're sometimes now referred to as the killicorn companies to contrast them with the unicorn companies. They're $1 trillion rather than $1 billion companies. Now, the feature of these $1 trillion companies is that they are highly driven, purposeful business. They have extremely purposeful leaders, or they had extremely purposeful leaders that set them up. Steve Jobs in the case of Apple, Jeff Bezos in the case of Amazon, Bill Gates in relation to Microsoft, Larry Page and Sergey Brin in Alphabet, which was previously Google, Mark Zuckerberg in relation to Facebook. Now, the underlying purposes that have been driving those businesses are around, first of all, the user-friendly nature of the innovations that they made. That was the case of Apple, and is very much a feature of, for example, the iPhone, but it was also a feature of what Microsoft was doing, a strong consumer focus, ensuring that consumers really benefit from the type of innovations that Jeff Bezos was making at Amazon, the technical capabilities associated with really all of these companies, the accessibility associated with Google, making the internet accessible to people around the world, and obviously the social connectivity associated with Facebook and the social networking companies. These are all examples of leading to produce solutions to problems. But it's also worth bringing out the extent to which these companies have been associated with creating problems as well as solving problems. For example, in relation to the natural resource usage, the mineral usage of companies such as Apple and Microsoft, the global warming that's associated with their products, the weak level of employee protection that existed or exists in Amazon, the extent to which technological innovations in the form of, for example, AI are associated with job substitution, job destruction rather than job creation, and some of the anti-competitive activities that we've seen associated with, for example, Google's interoperability procedures, and the way in which data has been used, in particular in the case of Facebook. So in the context of what I'm talking about of producing profitable solutions, but not profiting from producing problems, the actual profits of these businesses, the true profits of these businesses, should be less than, and potentially significantly less than, the reported profit. One can think about trying to evaluate that in terms of comparing the social and environmental costs associated with, for example, global warming and the data usage with the financial value, but that's quite difficult to do. And instead, a much better way of trying to do this is in terms of exactly what I'm talking about, saying, what is the true profit? What are the costs associated with remedying the detriments? And once one has that true profit, then that provides an indicator of what really should be the driver of the business and encouraging the right types of innovation along the lines of what Dr. Endo was talking about. And let me just emphasize that one cannot simply rely on regulators to do that, because regulators, in particular in high technology industries, are always behind the curve. They're always solving yesterday's problems. So as this is the last lecture in the series, let me just briefly sum up what has emerged from the series. And if any of you participated in all 5 of them, this will be familiar ground to you, but for the rest of you, it may give you a quick indication of what we've been doing. We first of all started off by defining the concept of purpose. In the second one, we looked at the role that law plays, and in particular the fiduciary responsibilities of directors to promote a company purpose, the function of regulation as promoting the alignment of purpose with the public interest, and in particular in companies that operate under social licenses, ensuring that their purposes are aligned with their licenses to operate. We drew a distinction in the third one between the notion of shareholders of companies, shareholders who own portfolios of shares that they trade actively, with owners who have a commitment to the delivery and a responsibility for the delivery of a company's purpose. And in that context, we also drew a distinction between the notion of the board as simply being the agents of the shareholders and the board as being trustees of the company purpose, looking after the company's purpose for the benefit of not just the shareholders, but society and the natural world more generally. And we brought out a distinction between shareholders, dispersed shareholders, and holders of large blocks of shares, where the block holders bring a degree of stability or potential degree of stability to the company in achieving its purpose that is not present if one simply relies on dispersed shareholders. And we noted that activism has been increasing as a form of block holding for relatively short periods of time, and that those to date have focused on creating shareholder value. But in the future, we are quite likely to see that activism moving more in the direction of promoting corporate purposes along the lines of what I've just been describing. And then in the final 2 lectures, we drew a parallel between the 2 types of ownership that are observed around the world. The dispersed ownership, where shareholders hold global portfolios of shares of companies around the world, what are sometimes termed universal shareholders, as against the holders of those blocks of shares. The form of the universal shareholders are concerned with global systemic risk, regulatory, international regulatory, political risks, climate change, etc., whereas the block holders with their concentrated shareholdings are concerned with the risks associated with the particular companies in which they're investing. And that then brought out a contrast between the types of measurement systems that are much emphasized at the moment around ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and the attempts to introduce universal standards around that, and what is required in actually measuring the specific purpose of a company. What emerges is that once one has a correct definition of a true profit of a company, then the simplicity and power of purpose really shines through in terms of the way in which it can drive both benefits for companies and for the societies and natural world. It aligns the private objective of firms and investors with those of society and the environment. And I just want to end by saying that I think that this is of particular relevance for Japan at the current time, because as you'll appreciate, there's a lot of concern in Japan about the performance of the Japanese economy in terms of its growth, productivity, investment, and innovation. And so much of the policy discussion that we've seen going on in Japan around changes in corporate governance reforms are really attempting to address that and to place greater emphasis on the involvement of foreign investors alongside those of the domestic traditional investors in Japanese companies. But at the same time, there is a concern and a desire to retain an emphasis which has very much prevailed in Japanese business through the 20th century into the 21st century about the importance not only of economic and business performance, but also of social cohesion and values that go beyond just financial value. And the point that I think comes out of this series is the significance of purpose as being a really powerful way of realizing both of these ambitions. The focus on profit promotes efficiency, growth, innovation, and investment, but also, for the reasons that I've just been describing, it aligns profit with social and environmental benefits so that there is no trade-off between these two types of objectives, and indeed a high degree of consistency between them. So it has a particular relevance to Japan, but this notion of corporate purpose has a relevance to all countries seeking to promote societal and environmental benefits, as well as economic growth, innovation, and prosperity. Thank you very much.